A woman with no husband cannot own land. That is the law in Black Ridge. And Evelyn Mercer has 6 days before everything her father built is ripped away. Desperate and out of options, she walks into a dusty feed store and shocks the entire town by asking a quiet, scarred ranch hand she barely knows to marry her before the weekends. He says yes without hesitation, and their arrangement ignites a war that will decide whether survival can become something more. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit the like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The law came for Evelyn Mercer on a Tuesday morning in late October, delivered by a man in a gray suit who looked like he had never touched dirt in his life. She stood on the porch of the ranch house her father built 30 years ago, the wind cutting through her wool coat, and watched the stranger climb down from his buggy with a leather satchel under one arm. He did not smile. He did not apologize. He simply handed her a folded document stamped with the county seal and told her she had until the end of the month to comply. Comply with what? Evelyn asked, though she already felt the answer like a stone dropping into her stomach. Section 12 of the Territory Land Act, the man said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. Unmarried women cannot hold property exceeding 200 acres without a legal guardian or husband. Your father's estate falls under review. If you fail to meet the requirements by November 1st, the land will be auctioned to satisfy the county's interest. Evelyn stared at him. The paper in her hand felt heavier than it should have. My father died 6 months ago, she said slowly. I've been running this ranch alone ever since. Nobody said anything then. The county was unaware of your father's passing until recently. Now that we are, the law applies. This land has been in my family since before statehood. That doesn't change the statute, Miss Mercer. She wanted to tear the document in half and throw it at his feet. She wanted to scream that this was her home, her life, her father's legacy. But she knew men like this did not care about legacy. They cared about lines on a map and names on a deed. 6 days, she said quietly. 6 days, the man confirmed. Then he climbed back into his buggy and left without another word. Evelyn stood on that porch long after the dust settled behind him. The ranch stretched out before her, 240 acres of hard-won land, pastures her father had cleared with his own hands, fences he had mended every spring, cattle that bore the Mercer brand. And now it could all vanish because she had never been foolish enough to marry a man who would take it from her anyway. She crumpled the paper in her fist and walked back inside. By Thursday, the vultures had arrived. The first was Howard Blanchard, a portly merchant who owned the general store in town and fancied himself a gentleman. He showed up at noon with a bouquet of wildflowers that looked like he had pulled them from the side of the road. Miss Mercer, he said, sweating through his collar despite the cold. I heard about your unfortunate situation. I wanted to offer my assistance. Evelyn stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. What kind of assistance? Well, I've been thinking, if you need a husband to keep the land, I'd be honored to step in. We could make it a proper arrangement, of course. I'm a man of means, and I'd take good care of you. Take good care of me, Evelyn repeated. Or take good care of the ranch. Blanchard's smile faltered. Both, naturally. Get off my property. Now, Miss Mercer, there's no need to be rude. I said get off. He left, muttering under his breath about ungrateful women. The second man came that evening. His name was Thomas Fairchild, and unlike Blanchard, he did not bother with flowers or pleasantries. He was younger, sharper, with slicked back hair and a tailored coat that probably cost more than Evelyn made in a year. I'll be direct, Fairchild said, leaning against the porch railing like he already owned it. I want this land. I'll marry you, sign whatever papers you need, and in exchange, you transfer half the property to me. Clean, simple. Evelyn studied him. And what happens when you decide you want the other half? Fairchild smiled. Then we negotiate. Not interested. You should be. I'm the best offer you're going to get. Then I guess I'm not getting married. Fairchild's smile disappeared. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be the first time. He left without argument, but the look he gave her before climbing onto his horse made her skin crawl. By Friday night, Evelyn was exhausted. 3 more men had come calling, each one worse than the last. One suggested she sign over the land immediately and live in the main house as his housekeeper. Another outright told her he would buy the ranch at auction and she could stay on as a tenant if she was agreeable. She burned the county document in the fireplace that night and watched the flames eat through the words. It changed nothing, but it felt good. Saturday morning, she woke before dawn and saddled her father's mare. She needed supplies. And more than that, she needed to get off the ranch before another man showed up with another degrading proposal. Black Ridge was not much of a town. A single dirt road lined with wooden buildings, a church at one end, a saloon at the other. The general store, the post office, a blacksmith, a feed store. Most people lived on ranches scattered across the valley, coming into town only when they needed something. Evelyn had grown up here, knew every family by name, and still felt like an outsider. Women did not run ranches in Black Ridge. Women did not inherit land. Women did not stand in the way of men who wanted what they had. She tied the mare outside the feed store and walked inside. The air smelled like hay and leather and old wood. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with tools, sacks of grain, coils of rope. A few men stood near the counter, talking in low voices. They stopped when they saw her. "Morning, Miss Mercer," the store owner said. His name was Daniel Worth, a wiry man in his 50s with a graying beard. He had known her father. "Morning, Daniel. Heard about your trouble with the county. That's a damn shame." "It is." One of the men near the counter snorted. "Should have gotten married when you had the chance. Too proud for your own good." Evelyn turned to look at him. His name was Garrett, a ranch hand who drank too much and worked too little. "And who should I have married, Garrett? You? Could have done worse." "I sincerely doubt that." Garrett's face reddened, and the other men laughed. He muttered something under his breath and walked out. Evelyn turned back to Daniel. "I need 3 sacks of grain and a coil of wire. I'll pay next week." "You know I don't do credit, Evelyn." "I know. I'm asking anyway." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but next week, no later." "Thank you." She was loading the grain into the wagon when she heard a voice behind her. "Need help with that?" Evelyn turned. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. She recognized him vaguely. Callum Hale, a ranch hand who worked odd jobs around town. Quiet, kept to himself. She had never spoken to him directly. "I've got it," she said. Callum stepped forward anyway and lifted the second sack like it weighed nothing. He set it in the wagon without a word. Evelyn frowned. "I said I've got it." "I know." He picked up the third sack. She studied him. He wore a faded work shirt and canvas pants, both patched and worn. His boots were scuffed, his hands scarred. He did not look at her, did not wait for thanks, just loaded the grain and stepped back. "Why'd you do that?" Evelyn asked. Callum shrugged. "Looked heavy." "I've been lifting heavy things my whole life." "Didn't say you couldn't." Evelyn opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She did not know what to make of him. "You work for the Talbot Ranch, don't you?" she asked. "Used to. Got let go last month." "Why?" "Didn't agree with how they treated the horses." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You got fired for disagreeing?" "More or less." "So what are you doing now?" "Looking for work." "Good luck with that." Callum nodded and started to walk away. "Wait," Evelyn said. He stopped. She did not know what made her say it. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that every other man in town had spent the last 3 days looking at her like she was a piece of land to be claimed, and this one had helped her without asking for anything in return. "You married?" she asked. Callum turned back to her. "No." "Got a wife? A fiancé? Someone waiting for you somewhere?" "No." Evelyn took a breath. "Then I have a question for you." Callum waited. "I need a husband," Evelyn said bluntly. "Not a real one. A legal one. Just a name on a document so the county doesn't take my land. No expectations, no obligations beyond that. You'd get a place to stay, food and wages when I can pay them. And when this is over, you walk away. Clean." Callum stared at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Because you're the first man in 3 days who hasn't looked at me like I'm something to be bought." Callum's expression did not change. "When?" "Monday. I have until the end of the month to register the marriage with the county. That gives us 2 days to make it legal." "All right." Evelyn blinked. "All right?" "Yeah." "You're not going to ask questions? Negotiate terms? Demand half the ranch?" "No." "Why not?" Callum looked at her directly for the first time. His eyes were gray, steady, unreadable. Because you asked. Evelyn did not know what to say to that. She had expected resistance, suspicion, maybe even insult. She had not expected agreement. Monday morning, she said. Meet me at the courthouse at 9. Callum nodded and walked away without another word. Evelyn stood beside the wagon, watching him disappear down the street, and wondered if she had just made the best decision of her life, or the worst. By Sunday night, the entire town knew. Evelyn had not told anyone, but someone had seen her talking to Callum outside the feed store, and in a town like Black Ridge, that was enough. By evening, half the valley had heard that Evelyn Mercer was marrying a drifter to keep her land. She ignored the stares when she went to the post office. She ignored the whispers when she passed the saloon. She ignored Thomas Fairchild when he stepped into her path outside the church and told her she was making a fool of herself. "You don't even know him," Fairchild said, his voice low and dangerous. "He's nobody. A hired hand with no family, no property, no future. You think that's going to save you?" "I think it's none of your business," Evelyn said. "Everything that happens in this town is my business." "Then you need a smaller town." Fairchild's jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." "I regret this conversation." She walked past him and did not look back. Monday morning came cold and gray. Evelyn woke before sunrise, dressed in the only clean dress she owned, a simple blue cotton thing her mother had made years ago, and rode into town alone. The courthouse was a squat brick building at the end of Main Street, flanked by the sheriff's office and the land registry. She tied her horse outside and walked up the steps. Callum was already there. Callum. He stood near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking like he had not slept. He wore the same patched work shirt and canvas pants, his hair still too long, the scar on his face stark in the morning light. He did not smile when he saw her. He just nodded. "You ready?" Evelyn asked. "Yeah." They walked inside together. The clerk was a thin, nervous man named Peter Aldridge, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. He glanced between Evelyn and Callum, then down at the marriage certificate on his desk. "This is highly irregular," Aldridge said. "It's legal," Evelyn replied. "Barely." "Is that a problem?" Aldridge sighed. "No, but I'm required to ask, are you both entering this marriage of your own free will?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "Yes," Callum said. "And you understand that this is a legally binding contract recognized by the territory and the county?" "We understand." Aldridge looked like he wanted to say more, but he did not. He dipped his pen in ink and slid the certificate toward them. "Sign here." Evelyn signed first. Her hand did not shake. Callum signed second. His handwriting was careful, deliberate. Aldridge added his own signature, stamped the document with the county seal, and handed Evelyn a copy. "Congratulations, you're married." Evelyn folded the paper and slipped it into her coat. "Thank you." They walked out together. The street was empty, the town still waking up. Evelyn untied her horse and turned to Callum. "That's it then," she said. "That's it." "You need a ride to the ranch?" "I can walk. It's 6 miles." "I know." Evelyn shook her head. "Get on the horse." Callum hesitated, then climbed up behind her. She felt the weight of him settle against her back, solid and warm, and something in her chest tightened. They rode in silence. The valley stretched out around them, wide and empty, the mountains rising in the distance like walls. The Mercer Ranch sat in the shadow of those mountains, a small house and a barn, and pastures that went on for miles. It was not much, but it was hers. She stopped the horse outside the barn and climbed down. Callum followed. "You can stay in the bunkhouse," Evelyn said, pointing to a small wooden structure behind the barn. "It's not much, but it's warm. I'll bring you blankets and firewood." "I'll get the firewood." "Suit yourself." Callum looked at the ranch, then at her. "Anything else you need?" Evelyn thought about it. "The fence on the north pasture needs mending. If you know how to do that, it'd help." "I know how." "All right." Callum nodded and walked toward the bunkhouse. Evelyn watched him go, then turned and headed back to the house. She did not know what came next. She did not know if this arrangement would hold, or if the county would find some other reason to take her land, or if Callum Hale would wake up one morning and realize he had made a mistake. But for the first time in 6 days, the ranch felt a little less empty, and that for now, was enough. Fuck. The first week of this arrangement passed in silence. Callum fixed the fence on the north pasture without being asked. He repaired the barn door that had been hanging crooked for months. He cleared brush from the south pasture and stacked firewood behind the house. He worked from dawn until dusk, ate meals alone in the bunkhouse, and never once asked Evelyn for anything. She told herself that was exactly what she wanted, a hired hand who did his job and stayed out of her way. No complications, no expectations, no risk of him deciding the land was worth more than the agreement. But it unsettled her. Most men in Black Ridge never shut up. They bragged about their ranches, their cattle, their plans to expand. They talked over women, interrupted conversations, filled every silence with their own voices. Callum did none of that. He worked, ate, and disappeared into the bunkhouse every night without a word. On the 8th day, Evelyn walked out to the north pasture and found him replacing a section of fence that had rotted through. He did not notice her at first, his attention fixed on the post he was driving into the ground. "You didn't have to do that," Evelyn said. Callum looked up. "It needed doing." "I could have done it." "I know." Evelyn crossed her arms. "You don't talk much, do you?" "Not much to say." Most men can't go 5 minutes without hearing their own voice. Callum's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I'm not most men." "No?" Evelyn said. "I'm starting to see that." She turned and walked back to the house before he could respond. That night she made stew and brought a bowl out to the bunkhouse. Callum was sitting on the steps, cleaning dirt from under his nails with a pocket knife. "I figured you were tired of eating jerky," Evelyn said, handing him the bowl. Callum took it. "Thank you." "It's not much." "It's more than I've had in a while." Evelyn sat down on the step beside him, uninvited. Callum glanced at her but said nothing. "Where are you from?" she asked. "Wyoming, originally. What brought you here?" "Work." "That's it?" Callum ate a spoonful of stew. "That's it." Evelyn frowned. "You really don't like talking about yourself, do you?" "No." "Why not?" "Because there's not much to tell." Evelyn studied him. The scar on his face was old, faded, but deep. She wondered how he had gotten it. She wondered what kind of life left a man so quiet, so guarded. "You got family?" she asked. "No." "None?" "None." "That must be lonely." Callum looked at her. "Not as lonely as you'd think." Evelyn did not know what to say to that. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "If you need anything, let me know." "I will." She walked back to the house and did not look back. By the end of the second week, winter arrived in full force. The first snowstorm hit on a Thursday morning, sudden and brutal. Evelyn woke to find the world buried under 6 inches of white, the wind howling through the valley like something alive. She dressed quickly, pulled on her father's old coat, and went outside to check on the cattle. Callum was already there. He had moved the herd into the shelter of the barn, checked the water troughs, and spread hay across the ground. Evelyn stopped in the doorway, watching him work. He did not move like a man who had been told what to do. He moved like a man who already knew. "You didn't have to do this," Evelyn said. Callum glanced at her. "Storm's getting worse, didn't want them freezing." "I could have handled it." "I know." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Why do you keep doing that?" "Doing what?" "Agreeing with me, and then doing it anyway." Callum straightened, brushing snow from his coat. "Because you shouldn't have to do it alone." Evelyn stared at him. She wanted to argue, to tell him that she had been doing it alone for 6 months and did not need his help, but the words caught in her throat. "Thank you," she said instead. Callum nodded and went back to work. The storm lasted 3 days. Evelyn and Callum spent most of it in the barn, keeping the animals warm, repairing tools, and waiting for the wind to die down. They did not talk much, but the silence between them was different now, less awkward, almost comfortable. On the third night, Evelyn made coffee and brought 2 mugs out to the barn. Callum was sitting on a hay bale, sharpening an axe. She handed him a mug and sat down beside him. "Hell of a storm," she said. "Yeah. You ever seen worse?" "Once. Montana. Lost half a herd." Evelyn winced. "That's rough." It was. They sat in silence, sipping coffee. Outside, the wind screamed. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said. "Sure." Why'd you say yeah? Callum looked at her. To what? To marrying me. You didn't ask for anything, didn't negotiate, just said yes. Why? Callum set the mug down. You needed help. That's it? That's it. Evelyn frowned. Most men would have asked for something in return. I'm not most men. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Evelyn turned the mug in her hands. I don't understand you. You don't have to. I want to. Callum looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, picked up the axe, and walked toward the barn door. Storm's letting up, he said. I'll check the fences in the morning. Evelyn watched him go, frustration and something else, something warmer, twisting in her chest. By the time the snow melted, the rumors had spread. People in Black Ridge had decided the marriage was a sham. Evelyn Mercer had married a nobody to keep her land, and it was only a matter of time before the arrangement fell apart. Thomas Fairchild made sure everyone knew. He told the men at the saloon, he told the clerk at the land office, he told anyone who would listen that Evelyn's marriage was fraudulent and that the county should investigate. Evelyn did not care. Let them talk. Let them whisper. She had her land, and that was all that mattered. But Callum cared. One evening, Evelyn came back from town to find him standing in the yard, his face hard, his knuckles bruised. What happened? She asked. Nothing. Your hand says otherwise. Callum flexed his fingers. Ran into Garrett at the feed store. He said some things. What kind of things? Doesn't matter. Evelyn stepped closer. What did he say? Callum met her eyes. That you married a coward who'd run the first time things got hard. Evelyn's jaw tightened. And what did you say? Nothing. I just hit him. Evelyn stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. What's funny? Callum asked. You, Evelyn said. You don't talk, you don't argue, but you'll punch a man for insulting me. He had it coming. Yeah, Evelyn said. He did. Callum looked at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that was not guarded or distant. It was warm. Real. I'm not running, he said quietly. Evelyn's breath caught. I know. Callum nodded and walked toward the bunkhouse. Evelyn stood in the yard watching him go, and for the first time since her father died, she did not feel alone. And that terrified her more than losing the land ever had. November slid into December, and the cold dug in like it planned to stay forever. The ranch settled into a rhythm that surprised Evelyn. Callum worked the fences, checked the cattle twice a day, and hauled water from the creek when the pump froze solid. She handled the ledgers, managed the feed inventory, and rode into town once a week for supplies. They divided the labor without discussion, each one picking up what the other left undone. It was not partnership exactly, but it was not employment either. It was something in between, something neither of them had a name for. And the whole time Black Ridge watched. Evelyn felt the stares every time she walked down Main Street. Women she had known her entire life turned away when she passed. Men muttered under their breath. The hostility was not loud or violent, but it pressed down on her like weight on her chest. She told herself she did not care. She had saved the ranch. That was all that mattered, but it wore on her. One afternoon in mid-December, she was loading supplies into the wagon when Margaret Pruitt stepped out of the dressmaker's shop and blocked her path. Margaret was 63, widowed twice, and had opinions about everything. Evelyn Mercer, Margaret said, her voice sharp as a knife, I've been meaning to speak with you. Evelyn set a sack of flour in the wagon. Mrs. Pruitt, is it true what they're saying, that you married that drifter to keep your land? It's true. Margaret's mouth pinched. That's disgraceful. What's disgraceful about it? You took a vow in front of the county and you're treating it like a business transaction. That's not what marriage is. Evelyn turned to face her fully. And what would you have had me do? Let the county take everything my father built? Marry one of the men who came sniffing around like I was livestock? You could have married someone respectable. Respectability doesn't keep a roof over your head. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You've always been stubborn, Evelyn, just like your father. And look where it got him. Evelyn's jaw tightened. My father built that ranch with his own hands. He died protecting it. If you think I'm going to apologize for doing the same, you're wasting your breath. Margaret sniffed. Mark my words. That man you married will take what he wants and leave you with nothing. Men like that always do. She turned and walked away before Evelyn could respond. Evelyn climbed into the wagon, her hands shaking. She told herself Margaret's words did not matter, but they lingered, sticky and poisonous, all the way back to the ranch. That night she cooked supper in silence. She made too much, like she always did now, and carried a plate out to the bunkhouse. Callum was sitting on the steps, cleaning his rifle. "You don't have to bring me food every night," he said. "I know." "Then why do you?" Evelyn handed him the plate. "Because I make too much and I'm tired of wasting it." Callum took the plate. "Thanks." Evelyn sat down beside him without asking. He glanced at her but said nothing. "Margaret Pruitt stopped me in town today," Evelyn said. "What'd she want?" "To tell me I'm disgraceful." Callum set the plate down. "She say why?" "Because I married you for the ranch instead of love." Evelyn laughed, but it came out bitter. Like love ever kept anyone fed. Callum was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You want me to talk to her?" "And say what?" "That it's none of her business." Evelyn shook her head. "Won't change anything. People believe what they want to believe." "Doesn't make it right." "No, but it's the way it is." Callum picked up the rifle again, running a cloth along the barrel. "You regret it?" Evelyn looked at him. "Regret what? Marrying me?" "No," Evelyn said without hesitation. "Do you?" "No." They sat in silence. The wind moved through the trees, cold and low. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "I don't care what they think," Evelyn said quietly. "I just wish they'd shut up about it." Callum nodded. "They will. Eventually." "How do you know?" "Because they'll find something else to talk about." Evelyn smiled despite herself. "You're probably right. I usually am." She laughed, and this time it was real. Callum looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "You should do that more," he said. "Do what?" "Laugh." Evelyn's smile faded. "Haven't had much reason to." "I know." He stood, picked up the plate, and went inside. Evelyn stayed on the steps a little longer, staring out at the dark valley, and wondered when sitting beside Callum had stopped feeling awkward and started feeling like something she looked forward to. The first real trouble came 2 days before Christmas. Evelyn was in the barn when she heard the horses. She stepped outside and saw 3 riders coming up the road. She recognized the man in front immediately, Thomas Fairchild. The other 2 were men she did not know, both wearing expensive coats and carrying themselves like they owned the world. Callum appeared from behind the barn, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. He did not say anything, just moved to stand beside Evelyn. Fairchild dismounted and smiled. "Miss Mercer, or should I say Mrs. Hale? What do you want, Fairchild?" "Just checking in, making sure everything's going well with your new arrangement." "It's going fine." "Is it?" Fairchild glanced at Callum. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you married a man who doesn't even sleep in your house." Evelyn's stomach dropped. She kept her face blank. "What happens on my property is none of your concern." "Actually, it is. See, I've been talking to some people at the county office. Turns out there's a clause in the law that says a marriage has to be legitimate. If it's proven to be fraudulent, the land goes to auction regardless. Our marriage is legitimate. Then you won't mind if I file a formal complaint? Let a judge decide." Evelyn stepped forward. "You're wasting your time." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm about to save this town from watching a woman disgrace herself." Fairchild's smile widened. "Either way, I'll see you in court." He climbed back onto his horse, tipped his hat, and rode away. The other 2 men followed. Evelyn stood frozen, her heart pounding. Callum watched them disappear down the road, his expression unreadable. "He can't do that," Evelyn said. "Can he?" "If he's got the money, he can do whatever he wants." Evelyn turned to him. "What do we do?" Callum met her eyes. "We prove him wrong." "How?" "By making it real." Evelyn stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Callum hesitated, then said, "If we live like we're married, he's got nothing. Move me into the house. Let people see us together. Make it look like what everyone expects." "You want to live in the house?" "I don't care where I live. But if it keeps him from taking your land, then yeah." Evelyn looked back toward the road, her mind racing. She hated the idea of changing anything because of Fairchild, but she hated the idea of losing the ranch more. "All right," she said. "Move your things into the spare room tonight." Callum nodded. "All right." That evening, Callum carried his belongings into the house. He did not have much: a bedroll, a spare shirt, a rifle, and a leather satchel that looked older than he was. Evelyn showed him to the spare room at the end of the hall. It was small, barely big enough for a bed and a chair, but it had a window that looked out over the valley. "This work?" Evelyn asked. "It's fine. There's blankets in the chest. If you need anything else, let me know." "I will." Evelyn turned to leave, then stopped. "This doesn't change anything. It's still an arrangement." Callum set the satchel on the bed. "I know." "Good." She left before he could say anything else. That night, Evelyn lay awake in her room, listening to the sounds of someone else moving through the house. The creak of floorboards, the scrape of a chair, the quiet thud of boots being set by the door. It was strange, unsettling, and somehow comforting. She told herself it did not mean anything, but she could not stop thinking about it. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee. She pulled on her robe and walked into the kitchen. Callum was standing by the stove, pouring a mug. He glanced at her. "Morning," he said. "You made coffee." "You were still asleep. Figured you'd want some." Evelyn took the mug he offered. "Thanks." They stood in silence, drinking coffee while the sun rose outside the window. It was awkward in a way it had not been before. Too domestic. Too familiar. "I'll check the cattle," Callum said, setting his mug down. "I'll come with you." They worked together that morning, moving through the pastures, checking the herd, repairing a section of fence that had come loose in the wind. They did not talk much, but the silence was easier now, less guarded. When they came back to the house for lunch, Evelyn made sandwiches and they ate at the kitchen table. Callum finished his food and leaned back in his chair. "You ever think about selling?" he asked. Evelyn looked at him sharply. "What?" "The ranch. You ever think about selling it and starting over somewhere else?" "No." "Why not?" "Because this is my home, my father's legacy. I'm not giving it up." Callum nodded slowly. "Just asking." "Why? You think I should?" "I think you're fighting a war you didn't start, and I think it's costing you more than you're willing to admit." Evelyn set her sandwich down. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're exhausted. You barely sleep. You don't eat enough. You're carrying this place on your back and pretending it doesn't hurt." "I'm fine." "You're not." Evelyn stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're stubborn. I know you'd rather break than bend. And I know you're scared." "I'm not scared." "Yes, you are." Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. "Get out." Callum stood. "Evelyn." "I said get out." He left without another word. Evelyn stood in the kitchen, shaking. She hated that he was right, hated that he could see through her so easily, hated that he had made her feel something she had spent 6 months trying to bury. She did not see him for the rest of the day. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the ledger in front of her. The numbers blurred together. She rubbed her eyes, exhaustion pressing down on her like a weight. She heard footsteps behind her. Callum appeared in the doorway, holding a blanket. "You fell asleep at the table last night," he said. "Figured you might do it again." Evelyn looked up at him. "I'm sorry for earlier." "You don't have to apologize." "Yes, I do. You were trying to help and I snapped at you." Callum set the blanket on the table. "You're allowed to snap. You're carrying a lot." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Trust someone. Let someone help. I've been doing everything alone for so long, I don't know how to stop." Callum sat down across from her. "You don't have to stop. You just have to let me carry some of it." Evelyn looked at him, and for the first time, she let herself really see him. The scars on his hands, the way he moved carefully, like someone who had been hurt before, the quiet strength in his eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care?" Callum was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I know what it's like to have nothing. And I know what it's like to have something worth protecting." Evelyn's breath caught. This ranch isn't yours. I know, but you are. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and real. Evelyn did not know what to say. She stood, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, and walked toward the hallway. She stopped in the doorway and looked back at him. "Thank you," she said quietly. Callum nodded. "Get some sleep." She went to bed, but she did not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, and thought about the way Callum had looked at her. Not like she was something to be claimed or controlled, like she was someone worth standing beside. And that scared her more than anything. Christmas came and went without ceremony. Evelyn and Callum worked through the day like any other, feeding cattle, hauling water, and repairing the roof of the barn where snow had caved in a section of old wood. Evelyn made a simple meal that evening, roasted chicken, potatoes, bread, and they ate together at the kitchen table in silence. "You ever celebrate Christmas?" Evelyn asked. Callum shrugged. "Not in a long time." "Why not?" "Never had anyone to celebrate with." Evelyn set her fork down. "That's sad." "It's just the way it was." "Well, you have someone now." Callum looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "Yeah, I guess I do." They finished the meal and washed the dishes together. It was strange standing side by side at the sink, their hands brushing occasionally in the soapy water. Domestic, comfortable, and terrifying. When they were done, Callum dried his hands and said, "I'll check the animals one more time before bed." "You already checked them." "I know, but the temperature's dropping. Just want to make sure." Evelyn watched him pull on his coat and step outside. She stood at the window, watching his figure disappear into the dark, and wondered when he had stopped being just a hired hand and started being something more. The new year arrived with more snow. January was brutal. Storms rolled through the valley, one after another, burying the ranch under drifts that reached the windows. Evelyn and Callum spent most of their time in the barn, keeping the animals warm and dry. The work was endless, exhausting, and left no room for anything else. But the isolation changed things. They talked more now. Not about anything important, just small things. Callum told her about working ranches in Wyoming and Montana. Evelyn told him about growing up on the Mercer land, about her father teaching her to ride and shoot and manage cattle. The conversations were easy, unrehearsed, and Evelyn found herself looking forward to them. One night, they were sitting in the barn, waiting out a storm, when Callum asked, "What happened to your mother?" Evelyn looked at him. "She died when I was 12, fever." "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago." "Still." Evelyn pulled her coat tighter. "What about your parents?" "Dead, both of them." "How?" "Cholera. I was 16. Evelyn winced. "That's rough." "Yeah." They sat in silence. Outside, the wind howled. "You ever think about leaving?" Evelyn asked. "Just packing up and going somewhere new?" "I've done that plenty of times. Never made anything better." "Why not?" Callum looked at her. "Because the problem wasn't where I was. It was that I didn't have anywhere to be." Evelyn's chest tightened. "And now?" "Now I do." The words settled between them, quiet and true. Evelyn wanted to say something, to acknowledge what he had just admitted, but she could not find the words. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. Callum looked down at their joined hands, then back at her. He did not pull away. He just held on. They sat like that until the storm passed. By the end of January, the town's hostility had shifted into something sharper. Evelyn heard the whispers every time she went into town. People muttered about her marriage being a sham. They said Callum was only there for the land. They said it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. Thomas Fairchild made sure the rumors spread. One afternoon, Evelyn was at the general store when Daniel Worth pulled her aside. "You need to be careful," he said quietly. "Careful of what?" "Fairchild's been talking to people. He's convinced the county clerk to open an investigation into your marriage." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "What kind of investigation?" "The kind where they ask questions, interview people, try to prove it's not legitimate." "It is legitimate." "I know. But if Fairchild gets enough people to testify otherwise, it won't matter." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "When?" "I don't know. Soon." She left the store and rode back to the ranch faster than she should have. Callum was in the barn when she arrived, fixing a broken bridle. "We have a problem," Evelyn said. Callum set the bridle down. "What kind?" Fairchild's opened an investigation. They're going to question people about the marriage, try to prove it's fraudulent. Callum's expression hardened. What do we do? I don't know. If they decide it's not real, I lose the ranch. Then we make it real. Evelyn stared at him. We've been over this. We're already living in the same house. I'm not talking about the house. Callum stepped closer. I'm talking about telling the truth. What truth? That this stopped being an arrangement weeks ago. Evelyn's breath caught. Callum, you know it's true. You've known it for a while. That doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Evelyn shook her head. I can't do this. I can't risk it. Risk what? Letting someone care about you? Letting yourself care about someone? Yes! The word came out sharper than she intended. Because everyone I've ever cared about has left. My mother died. My father died. And I can't... Her voice broke. I can't lose anyone else. Callum reached out and took her hand. I'm not leaving. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Evelyn pulled her hand away. You say that now. But when things get hard, when this place stops being worth the trouble, you'll leave just like everyone else. I won't. How do you know? Because I've been alone my whole life and I'm tired of it. Because for the first time in years I have a reason to stay. And because He stopped, his jaw tightening. Because what? Evelyn whispered. Callum looked at her and his voice was rough when he spoke. Because I'm in love with you. The words hit her like a punch. Evelyn stood frozen, her heart pounding, her mind racing. You don't mean that, she said. I do. We've only been married 2 months. I don't care. Callum, this is insane. Maybe. But it's the truth. Evelyn turned away, her hands shaking. She did not know what to say. She did not know what to feel. She had spent so long protecting herself, building walls, refusing to let anyone in. And now Callum was standing there, breaking through every defense she had, and she did not know how to stop him. I need time, she said quietly. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Evelyn left the barn without looking back. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and replayed his words over and over. Because I'm in love with you. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that someone could love her without wanting to take something in return. But fear wrapped around her chest like iron bands, and she could not breathe through it. The investigation began a week later. A county official arrived at the ranch with a stack of papers and a list of questions. Evelyn and Callum sat across from him at the kitchen table, answering every question as honestly as they could. How long have you known each other? The official asked. Since October, Evelyn said. And you married in November? Yes. Why the rush? Because I was running out of time. The official made a note. And Mr. Hale, what do you get out of this arrangement? Callum looked at him. A place to stay, work, a reason to get up in the morning. That's it? That's it. The official did not look convinced. He asked more questions about their sleeping arrangements, about their daily routines, about whether they had consummated the marriage. Evelyn answered every question through gritted teeth, hating every second of it. When the official finally left, she slammed the door behind him and stood in the hallway, shaking with rage. This is humiliating, she said. Callum leaned against the wall. I know. They're treating us like criminals. I know. And if they decide it's not real, I lose everything. I know. Evelyn turned to him. Why are you so calm? Because getting angry won't change anything. It might make me feel better. Callum smiled faintly. Then go ahead. Evelyn wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. Instead, she walked into the kitchen and started making coffee, her hands shaking. Callum followed her. It's going to be okay. You don't know that. I do. How? Because we're telling the truth, and the truth is stronger than whatever lies Fairchild's spreading. Evelyn looked at him, and something in her chest loosened. You really believe that? I do. She poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed him one. They stood in silence, drinking, and Evelyn felt some of the tension ease out of her shoulders. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For staying? For fighting? For... She stopped, her throat tightening. For everything. Callum set his mug down and stepped closer. Evelyn, She looked up at him, and the distance between them felt impossibly small. I meant what I said, Callum said quietly. I'm not leaving, no matter what happens. Evelyn's breath caught. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself fall, but the fear was still there, sharp and cold. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. You don't have to do anything. Just let me stay. Evelyn closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, she let herself lean into him. Callum wrapped his arms around her, solid and warm, and Evelyn felt something inside her crack open. She did not know what came next. She did not know if they would survive the investigation, or if Fairchild would find a way to take the ranch, or if she could ever truly trust someone again. But for now, standing in the kitchen with Callum's arms around her, she let herself believe that maybe she did not have to face it alone. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning in early February, delivered by a deputy who looked embarrassed to be there. Evelyn stood in the doorway staring at the paper in her hands. The words blurred together, but the meaning was clear enough. Thomas Fairchild had formally challenged the legitimacy of her marriage in territorial court. The hearing was set for March 3rd. If the judge ruled against them, the ranch would be auctioned within 30 days. Callum appeared behind her, reading over her shoulder. When? 5 weeks. That's not much time. No. Evelyn folded the paper and shoved it into her pocket. It's not. They spent the rest of the day working in silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Evelyn tried to focus on the cattle, the fences, the endless tasks that kept the ranch running, but her mind kept circling back to the hearing. What would they ask? What could she say that would make a judge believe this marriage was real? That night she sat at the kitchen table with the summons spread out in front of her, trying to make sense of the legal language. Callum walked in with 2 mugs of coffee and set one in front of her. You're going to wear a hole in that paper, he said. I'm trying to figure out what they're going to ask. They're going to ask if we're really married, and we'll tell them yes. Evelyn looked up at him. It's not that simple. Why not? Because Fairchild's going to bring witnesses, people who'll say we don't act like a married couple, that we're only doing this for the land. Then we show them they're wrong. How? Callum sat down across from her. By telling the truth. Evelyn's throat tightened. What truth? That we started this as an arrangement? That we barely knew each other when we got married? That sounds exactly like what Fairchild's claiming. That's how it started. But it's not how it is now. Evelyn looked away. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that what had grown between them in the last 3 months was enough to convince a judge. But fear wrapped around her chest like wire, and she could not shake it loose. What if it's not enough? She whispered. Callum reached across the table and took her hand. Then we fight harder. Evelyn stared at their joined hands. His were rough, scarred from years of hard work. Hers were no better. They were the hands of people who had spent their lives surviving, not living, and now they were supposed to stand in front of a courtroom and convince strangers that they belonged together. I don't know if I can do this, she said. You can, and you will. How do you know? Because I've watched you fight for this place every single day since I got here. You don't quit, even when you should. Evelyn's eyes burned. I'm scared. I know, so am I. She looked at him, surprised. You are? Yeah, because I've never had anything worth losing before. And now I do. Evelyn's breath caught. She squeezed his hand, and for a moment the fear loosened just enough for her to breathe. We'll figure it out, Callum said quietly. Together. Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Evelyn and Callum worked the ranch like always, but the weight of the hearing hung over everything. They talked about what they would say, how they would present themselves, what witnesses they could bring. Evelyn made a list of people who might testify on their behalf, but the list was short. Most of the town had already made up their minds. Daniel Worth agreed to testify. He had seen them together in town, had watched Callum work the ranch alongside Evelyn. He believed the marriage was real, and he was willing to say so in court. Margaret Pruitt, unsurprisingly, refused. You made your bed, she told Evelyn. Now you have to lie in it. Evelyn did not bother arguing. One evening in late February, Callum came back from town with news. He had spoken to a lawyer, a man named Samuel Grant, who had a small practice on the edge of Black Ridge. Grant had agreed to represent them at the hearing. What'd he say? Evelyn asked. He said Fairchild's going to argue that the marriage was entered into fraudulently, that we never intended to live as husband and wife, only to satisfy the legal requirement. And what do we say? That circumstances change, that what started as an arrangement became something real. Evelyn frowned. Will that work? Grant thinks so, but he said we need to be convincing. The judge is going to be looking for proof that we're actually living as a married couple. We are. I know, but we have to make them believe it. Evelyn looked at him. What does that mean? Callum hesitated. It means we need to act like we're married, not just in private, in front of the whole town. Evelyn's stomach twisted. You mean hold hands? Call each other pet names? I mean, stop pretending we're just business partners. I'm not pretending. Then what are you doing? Evelyn stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm trying to protect myself. From what? From this, she gestured between them. From letting myself care about someone who might leave the second things get hard. Callum stood too. I've told you a dozen times. I'm not leaving. You say that now, and I'll say it every day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes for you to believe me. Evelyn's breath hitched. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt, but the fear was still there, sharp and cold. I don't know how, she whispered. Callum stepped closer. Then let me show you. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. Evelyn froze, her heart pounding. Callum's eyes searched hers, and then he leaned in and kissed her. It was not rushed or desperate. It was slow, careful, like he was giving her time to pull away. But Evelyn did not pull away. She leaned into him, her hands gripping the front of his shirt, and kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, Callum rested his forehead against hers. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. Evelyn closed her eyes. Okay. Okay? Okay. Callum smiled, and Evelyn felt something in her chest crack open. It was terrifying, but it was also real. The night before the hearing, Evelyn could not sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through every possible outcome. If they lost, she would lose the ranch, lose her father's legacy, lose the only home she had ever known, and she would lose Callum. That thought scared her more than anything. She got up, pulled on her robe, and walked down the hall. Callum's door was open, and she could see him sitting on the edge of his bed, his head in his hands. You can't sleep either? She asked. Callum looked up. No? Evelyn stepped into the room. What are you thinking about? Tomorrow. You nervous? Yeah. Evelyn sat down beside him. Me too. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Callum said, Whatever happens, I want you to know something. What? Us. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Evelyn's throat tightened. Callum, I mean it. I spent most of my life drifting from place to place, never staying long enough to care about anything. And then I met you. And everything changed. You changed me. Evelyn looked at him, her eyes burning. I don't know if I'm brave enough for this. You're the bravest person I know. I'm not. I'm terrified. Then be terrified. But don't give up. Evelyn leaned against him, and Callum wrapped his arm around her. They sat like that until the first light of dawn crept through the window. The courthouse in Black Ridge was a small brick building with tall windows and a heavy wooden door. By the time Evelyn and Callum arrived, a crowd had already gathered outside. People stood in clusters, whispering and pointing. Evelyn felt their eyes on her like knives. Samuel Grant met them at the entrance. He was a thin man in his 40s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked tired, but his handshake was firm. You ready? He asked. As ready as we'll ever be, Evelyn said. Good. Remember what we talked about. Be honest. Don't let Fairchild rattle you. And above all, show them that this marriage is real. Evelyn nodded. Callum squeezed her hand. They walked inside together. The courtroom was smaller than Evelyn expected. Wooden benches lined the walls, already filled with spectators. At the front of the room, a judge sat behind a high desk, his expression stern and unreadable. Thomas Fairchild sat at the plaintiff's table with two lawyers in expensive suits. He looked smug, confident. Evelyn wanted to wipe that look off his face. Grant led them to the defendant's table. Evelyn sat down, her hands shaking. Callum sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She drew strength from his presence. The judge banged his gavel. This court is now in session. Case number 47, Fairchild versus Mercer. Mr. Fairchild, you may present your opening statement. One of Fairchild's lawyers stood. He was a tall man with slicked back hair and a voice like gravel. Your Honor, this case is about fraud, pure and simple. Miss Mercer, Mrs. Hale, entered into a marriage contract not out of love or commitment, but to circumvent territorial law and retain property she is not legally entitled to hold. She married a man she barely knew, a drifter with no ties to this community, and convinced the county to accept this sham as legitimate. We intend to prove that this marriage is fraudulent and that the Mercer property should be forfeited to the county for proper auction. What? The lawyer sat down. Evelyn's jaw clenched. Grant stood. Your Honor, my clients entered into a legal marriage recognized by the territory. What began as a practical arrangement has become a genuine partnership. Mrs. Hale and her husband live together, work together, and have built a life together. This is not fraud. This is two people making the best of difficult circumstances and finding something real in the process. We will prove that this marriage is legitimate in every sense of the word. Grant sat down. The judge looked between the two tables. Mr. Fairchild, call your first witness. Fairchild's lawyer stood again. We call Margaret Pruitt to the stand. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Margaret walked to the witness stand, her face pinched and disapproving. She swore an oath and sat down. Mrs. Pruitt, the lawyer said, how long have you known Evelyn Mercer? Her whole life. I knew her father too. And what can you tell us about her recent marriage to Mr. Hale? Margaret's mouth thinned. It's a disgrace. She married a man she didn't know just to keep her land. They don't act like a married couple. They don't even attend services together. How do you know they don't act like a married couple? Because I've seen them in town. They barely speak to each other. No affection, no warmth. It's obvious they're only doing this for the legal benefit. Thank you, Mrs. Pruitt. Grant stood. Mrs. Pruitt, when was the last time you actually spoke to Mrs. Hale or Mr. Hale? Margaret hesitated. I don't recall exactly. Was it before or after their marriage? After. And what did you say to her? Margaret's face reddened. I told her she was making a mistake. So you've already decided this marriage is illegitimate, regardless of any evidence to the contrary. I know what I see. But you don't actually know what happens on the Mercer Ranch, do you? You don't live there. You don't see how they interact in private. You're basing your entire testimony on assumptions and gossip. I know enough? Thank you, Mrs. Pruitt. No further questions. Margaret stepped down, her face flushed with anger. Evelyn felt a small flicker of satisfaction. Fairchild's lawyer called 3 more witnesses. Garrett, the ranch hand from the feed store, testified that Callum was a nobody who had only married Evelyn for a place to stay. Howard Blanchard, the merchant, claimed he had proposed to Evelyn first and she had refused him, only to marry Callum days later. A third man, someone Evelyn barely recognized, said he had seen Callum sleeping in the bunkhouse weeks after the wedding. Each testimony felt like a knife to the chest. Evelyn sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. Callum's jaw was tight, his eyes hard. When the last witness finished, Fairchild's lawyer stood. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. This marriage is a legal fiction created solely to circumvent the law. We ask that you rule it fraudulent and order the forfeiture of the Mercer property. The judge looked at Grant. Mr. Grant, call your first witness. Grant stood. We call Daniel Worth. Daniel walked to the stand and swore his oath. He looked nervous, but his voice was steady. Mr. Worth, Grant said, how long have you known Mrs. Hale? Her whole life. I knew her father, worked with him on occasion. And what can you tell us about her marriage to Mr. Hale? I can tell you it's real. I've seen them together in town. I've watched the way they work the ranch. Callum's not some drifter looking for a meal ticket. He's a good man who works hard and treats Evelyn with respect. That's more than I can say for most of the men in this town. Thank you, Mr. Worth. Fairchild's lawyer stood. Mr. Worth, isn't it true that you've been friends with the Mercer family for years? Yes. So you have a bias in favor of Mrs. Hale. I have a bias in favor of the truth. No further questions. Grant called 2 more witnesses. A neighboring rancher testified that he had seen Callum working the Mercer land in the dead of winter, fixing fences and hauling feed. A woman from town said she had seen Evelyn and Callum shopping together, and they had seemed comfortable with each other. But Evelyn knew it was not enough. The testimonies were thin, and the judge's expression remained unreadable. Finally, Grant stood. "We call Evelyn Hale to the stand." Evelyn's heart pounded. She stood, her legs shaking, and walked to the witness stand. She swore the oath and sat down. Grant approached. "Mrs. Hale, why did you marry Callum Hale?" Evelyn took a breath. "Because I was desperate. The county was going to take my land because I didn't have a husband. Callum needed work. It made sense." "So it started as a business arrangement?" "Yes." "And is that all it is now?" Evelyn looked at Callum. He was watching her, his eyes steady and calm. She thought about the last 3 months. The way he had worked beside her without complaint. The way he had held her when she was scared. The way he had kissed her and told her he was not leaving. "No," she said quietly, "it's not." "Can you explain?" Evelyn's throat tightened. "When we got married, I didn't know him. I didn't trust him. I was just trying to survive. But over the last 3 months, he's proven himself in ways I didn't expect. He's worked harder than anyone I've ever met. He's never asked for anything in return. He's been patient with me when I didn't deserve it. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing him as a hired hand and started seeing him as a partner, as someone I could rely on, as someone I—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "As someone you love?" Grant prompted gently. Evelyn looked at Callum again. He was leaning forward, his expression open and raw. "Yes," she said, "as someone I love." The courtroom went silent. Grant nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Hale." No further questions. Fairchild's lawyer stood, his expression sharp. "Mrs. Hale, you just admitted that this marriage started as a business arrangement. How can you expect this court to believe it suddenly becomes something real?" "Because people change. Circumstances change. Just because something starts one way doesn't mean it stays that way." "But you've only been married for 3 months. That's hardly enough time to build a real relationship." "I've spent every day of the last 3 months with him. I've seen who he is when no one's watching. That's more than most people get before they marry." "And yet you still sleep in separate rooms, don't you?" Evelyn's face burned. "We did. Until recently. Until you knew you'd be questioned in court. Until I stopped being afraid." The lawyer's eyes narrowed. "Afraid of what?" "Of losing someone else I care about." The lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no response to that. "No further questions," he muttered. Evelyn stepped down, her legs shaking. She sat down beside Callum, and he reached over and took her hand. She held on tight. Grant stood. "We call Callum Hale to the stand." Callum walked to the witness stand and swore the oath. He sat down, his expression calm. Grant approached. "Mr. Hale, why did you agree to marry Mrs. Hale?" "Because she needed help." "That's it?" "That's it." "You didn't want her land, her property?" "No." "Then why stay?" Callum looked at Evelyn. "Because somewhere along the way, it stopped being about survival and started being about something more. I've spent my whole life moving from place to place, never staying long enough to care about anything. And then I met Evelyn, and I realized I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay. I wanted to build something, and I wanted to do it with her." Grant nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Hale." Fairchild's lawyer stood. "Mr. Hale, you said you've moved from place to place your whole life. What's to stop you from leaving Mrs. Hale the same way you've left every other place?" "Because I've never had a reason to stay before." "And you think love is enough of a reason?" "I think it's the only reason that matters." The lawyer frowned. No further questions. Callum stepped down and sat beside Evelyn. She could feel the tension radiating off him. The judge leaned back in his chair. "Does the plaintiff have any further witnesses?" Fairchild's lawyer stood. "We call Thomas Fairchild to the stand." Fairchild walked to the witness stand, his expression smug. He swore the oath and sat down. "Mr. Fairchild," his lawyer said, "why did you bring this case to court?" "Because I believe in the law, and the law says that a marriage must be legitimate. This marriage is not. It's a fraud designed to circumvent territorial statutes. and I will not stand by and watch it happen. Thank you, Mr. Fairchild. Grant stood. Mr. Fairchild, you proposed to Mrs. Hale before she married Mr. Hale, didn't you? Fairchild's smile faltered. I offered to help her. By marrying her and taking half her land, by providing her with the protection she needed. And when she refused, you filed this lawsuit. Isn't that correct? I filed this lawsuit because the marriage is fraudulent. Or because you wanted her land and she chose someone else. Fairchild's face reddened. That's absurd. Is it? You've made no secret of your desire to expand your holdings. The Mercer Ranch borders your property. If Mrs. Hale loses this case, the land goes to auction, and you're in the perfect position to buy it. This isn't about justice, Mr. Fairchild. This is about greed. I object, Fairchild's lawyer shouted. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Grant, keep your questions relevant. Grant stepped back. No further questions. Fairchild stepped down, his face flushed with anger. The judge looked at both tables. Closing statements. Fairchild's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this case is simple. The marriage was entered into fraudulently, and the law is clear. We ask that you rule accordingly. Grant stood. Your Honor, this case is about two people who found each other in difficult circumstances and built something real. The law requires a marriage to be legitimate, and this marriage is. Not because of legal documents, but because of the commitment and care these two people have shown each other. We ask that you recognize that and uphold their union. The judge nodded. I'll take this under advisement. Court is adjourned. He banged his gavel, and the room erupted into murmurs. Evelyn sat frozen, her heart pounding. What happens now? She asked Grant. We wait. The judge will issue his ruling in a few days. A few days? Maybe a week. I know it's hard, but there's nothing we can do until then. Evelyn stood, her legs weak. Callum put his arm around her, and they walked out of the courtroom together. The crowd parted for them, whispering and staring. Evelyn did not care. She had told the truth. She had admitted in front of the entire town that she loved Callum Hale, and now all she could do was wait. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Evelyn sat beside Callum in the wagon, her mind replaying every moment of the hearing. The way she had admitted her feelings in front of everyone, the way Fairchild's face had twisted with rage, the way the judge had looked at them both, his expression impossible to read. You did good in there, Callum said finally. Evelyn looked at him. Did I? Yeah. You told the truth. I'm not sure the truth is enough. It has to be. Evelyn wanted to believe him, but the fear sat heavy in her chest, and she could not shake it. When they reached the ranch, Callum helped her down from the wagon. His hands lingered on her waist for a moment, and Evelyn looked up at him. What happens if we lose? She asked quietly. We won't. But what if we do? Callum's jaw tightened. Then we figure it out. Together. Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked into the house, and the silence felt heavier than usual. Evelyn made coffee while Callum sat at the table, staring at his hands. I meant what I said, Evelyn said, setting a mug in front of him. In court, about loving you. Callum looked up at her. I know. I should have said it sooner. I was just scared. I know. Evelyn sat down across from him. I'm still scared. Me too. Really? Callum nodded. Every day. Because I've never had this before. Never had someone who mattered this much. And the thought of losing it, losing you, it terrifies me. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I'm choosing you, every day, no matter what happens. Callum's eyes burned and he squeezed her hand. I'm choosing you too. They sat like that for a long time, holding on to each other in the quiet kitchen, while the sun set over the valley and the world outside faded away. The waiting was brutal. Days passed with no word from the judge. Evelyn tried to focus on the ranch, but every task felt meaningless. What was the point of fixing fences if they were going to lose the land? What was the point of planning for spring if there was no future? Callum worked beside her, steady as always. He did not talk much, but his presence was enough. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Mornings checking the cattle, afternoons repairing equipment, evenings cooking together in the kitchen, their movements synchronized in a way that felt natural, earned. One night, Evelyn woke to the sound of the floorboards creaking. She got up and found Callum standing by the window in the front room, staring out at the dark valley. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. Callum turned. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." Evelyn walked over and stood beside him. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything, nothing, I don't know." Evelyn looked at his profile, the scar on his face stark in the moonlight. "Tell me something about yourself, something you've never told anyone." Callum glanced at her. "Why?" "Because I want to know you, all of you." Callum was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I was 17, I worked on a ranch in Wyoming. The owner was a cruel man, beat his horses, beat his workers. One day I stood up to him, told him if he touched another horse, I'd make him regret it." "What did he do?" "He came at me with a branding iron. That's how I got this." Callum touched the scar on his face. "I left that night and never went back." Evelyn's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me something." "What?" "That some things are worth fighting for, even when you know you'll lose." Evelyn looked at him, and something in her chest cracked open. She reached up and traced the scar with her fingers. Callum closed his eyes. "You're not going to lose this time," Evelyn whispered. "How do you know?" "Because I won't let you." Callum opened his eyes, and the look in them was raw and unguarded. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, slow and deep. Evelyn melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they finally broke apart, Callum rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," Evelyn said quietly. Callum pulled back, searching her face. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He took her hand, and they walked down the hall to her room. Evelyn's heart pounded, but it was not from fear. It was from something else, something that felt like hope. They lay together in the dark, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in months, Evelyn felt safe. The ruling came on a Saturday morning. Evelyn was in the barn when Callum found her. He was holding a letter, his face pale. "It's here," he said. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What does it say?" "I don't know. I didn't open it." Evelyn took the letter, her hands shaking. The county seal was stamped on the front. She broke it open and unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the words, and her breath caught. "What does it say?" Callum asked. Evelyn looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "We won." Callum stared at her. "What?" "The judge ruled in our favor. The marriage is legitimate. The ranch is ours." Callum grabbed the letter and read it himself. His hands were shaking. "We won." "We won," Evelyn repeated, and then she was laughing and crying at the same time. Callum pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "We did it," he said against her hair. "We actually did it." Evelyn pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. "We did." Callum kissed her, hard and desperate, and Evelyn kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "What do we do now?" Evelyn asked. Callum smiled. "We live." The news spread through Black Ridge within hours. People who had whispered behind Evelyn's back suddenly acted like they had believed in her all along. Margaret Pruitt avoided her entirely. Thomas Fairchild left town the next day, his tail between his legs. Daniel Worth stopped by the ranch a few days later with a bottle of whiskey and a wide grin. "Congratulations," he said, handing Callum the bottle. "You two earned this." "Thanks, Daniel," Evelyn said. Daniel looked between them, his expression warm. "You know, I never doubted you, not for a second." Evelyn smiled. "I appreciate that." Daniel tipped his hat and left. Evelyn and Callum sat on the porch that evening, passing the bottle back and forth, watching the sun set over the valley. "Hard to believe it's over," Evelyn said. "It's not over," Callum said. "It's just beginning." Evelyn looked at him. "What do you mean?" Callum set the bottle down and turned to face her. "I mean, we've been living like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, like this was all temporary. But it's not. We won. The ranch is ours. And I want to build a life here. With you." Evelyn's throat tightened. "So do I." "Then let's do it. Let's stop pretending this is just an arrangement and make it real. All of it." "It already is real." "I know, but I want it to be official." Evelyn frowned. We're already married. Callum shook his head. We got married because we had to. I want to marry you because I want to, because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Evelyn's breath caught. Callum's. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver ring. It was simple, unadorned, but beautiful. I bought this in town a few weeks ago. I was waiting for the right moment, and I figure there's no better moment than now. Evelyn stared at the ring, her heart pounding. Evelyn Mercer, Callum said quietly. Will you marry me? For real this time? Evelyn's eyes burned. We're already married. I know, but I want to do it right. No contracts, no conditions. Just you and me. Evelyn looked at him, and the fear that had lived in her chest for so long finally loosened. She took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. Yes, she said. 1,000 times yes. Callum pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Evelyn felt like she was flying. The second wedding happened a week later. It was small, just a handful of people in the front yard of the ranch. Daniel Worth stood as a witness. Samuel Grant was there, smiling. Even a few neighbors showed up, the ones who had believed in them from the beginning. Evelyn wore her mother's dress, simple and white. Callum wore a new shirt and pants, his hair finely trimmed, the scar on his face no longer something he tried to hide. They stood under the oak tree her father had planted 30 years ago, and Samuel Grant read the vows. Evelyn and Callum repeated them, their voices steady and sure. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Grant said. Again. Everyone laughed. Callum kissed Evelyn, and the small crowd cheered. Afterward, they had a simple meal in the yard. Daniel brought more whiskey. Someone played a fiddle. Evelyn danced with Callum under the stars, his arms wrapped around her, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely at peace. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. For what? For staying, for fighting, for loving me. Callum pulled back and looked at her. You don't have to thank me for that. I do. Because you didn't have to. You could have walked away a dozen times, and you didn't. I told you, I'm not going anywhere. Evelyn smiled. I believe you. Good. They danced until the moon was high in the sky, and when the guests finally left, Evelyn and Callum walked back into the house together. Their house. Their home. Spring came slowly to the valley, melting the snow and thawing the ground. Evelyn and Callum worked the ranch together, planting new fields, repairing the barn, and preparing for the cattle to calve. The work was hard, but it was theirs. One morning in late April, Evelyn woke feeling sick. She barely made it outside before she threw up. Callum found her leaning against the porch railing, pale and shaking. You all right? He asked. I'm fine, just something I ate. But it happened again the next morning. And the morning after that. By the end of the week, Evelyn knew. She told Callum that evening while they were sitting on the porch. He stared at her, his face blank. You're pregnant? He asked. I think so. Callum stood, pacing the length of the porch. Evelyn watched him, her heart pounding. Say something, she said. Callum stopped and turned to her. I'm going to be a father. Yeah. A slow smile spread across his face. I'm going to be a father. Evelyn laughed. That's what I just said. Callum pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground. We're having a baby. We are. He set her down and cupped her face in his hands. I love you. I love you too. They stood like that, holding each other as the sun set over the valley, and Evelyn felt like her chest might burst. The pregnancy was not easy. Evelyn was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down. Callum hovered, bringing her water, making her tea, worrying constantly. I'm fine, Evelyn said for the 100th time. You don't look fine. I'm pregnant, not dying. I know, but I can't help worrying. Evelyn reached out and took his hand. I know, but you need to trust me. I've survived worse than this. Callum nodded, but the worry did not leave his eyes. By summer, the sickness had passed, and Evelyn felt stronger. Her belly grew, and Callum stared at it like it was a miracle. Can I? He asked one night, reaching out. Evelyn took his hand and placed it on her stomach. A moment later, the baby kicked. Callum's eyes went wide. Did you feel that? Evelyn asked. Yeah. That's our baby. Callum looked at her, his eyes shining. I can't believe this is real. It's real. I never thought I'd have this. A home, a family, someone to love. Evelyn's throat tightened. You have it now. I know, and I'm never letting it go. By autumn, the ranch was thriving. The cattle were healthy, the crops were good, and Evelyn and Callum had saved enough money to hire a hand to help with the work. The valley was changing too. More women were filing claims for land, inspired by Evelyn's fight. The law had not changed, but the precedent had been set. One evening, Evelyn was sitting on the porch, her hand resting on her swollen belly, when Callum came out with 2 mugs of cider. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired, sore, ready for this baby to be here." Callum sat down beside her. "Not much longer now." "Another month," the doctor said. "You scared?" Evelyn looked at him. "A little. Are you?" "Terrified," Evelyn laughed. "Good. At least I'm not alone." Callum took her hand. "You're never alone. Not anymore." Evelyn leaned against him, and they sat in silence, watching the sun set over the valley. The same valley her father had loved, the same valley she had fought to keep. And now it was hers, truly hers. The baby came on a cold October morning. Evelyn's water broke just after midnight, and Callum nearly fell out of bed in his panic. He rode into town to fetch the doctor, while Evelyn paced the house, breathing through the contractions. The labor was long and brutal. Evelyn screamed and cursed and gripped Callum's hand so hard she thought she might break it. But Callum stayed beside her the entire time, whispering encouragement, wiping her forehead, refusing to leave even when the doctor suggested he wait outside. "I'm not leaving," Callum said firmly. "Damn right you're not," Evelyn gasped. The baby was born just after dawn, a girl, small and red-faced and screaming. The doctor cleaned her off and placed her in Evelyn's arms, and the world stopped. Evelyn stared down at her daughter, tears streaming down her face. The baby had dark hair and gray eyes, just like Callum. She was perfect. "She's beautiful," Callum whispered, his voice breaking. "She is. What do we name her?" Evelyn thought for a moment. Then she said, "Grace, after my mother." Callum smiled. "Grace Hale, I like that." Grace wrapped her tiny hand around Callum's finger, and Callum looked at Evelyn, his eyes shining. "We did it," he said. "We did." Evelyn looked down at her daughter and then at Callum, and she felt something settle deep in her chest. This was her family, her home, her life, and it was more than she had ever dared to hope for. The weeks after Grace's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. Evelyn was exhausted, but she had never been happier. Callum threw himself into fatherhood with the same quiet determination he brought to everything else. He changed diapers without complaint, walked Grace around the house when she cried, and sang to her in a low, rough voice that made Evelyn's heart ache. One night, Evelyn woke to find Callum's side of the bed empty. She got up and found him in the nursery, holding Grace against his chest, rocking her gently. "She was fussing," he said quietly. "Didn't want to wake you." Evelyn walked over and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You're a good father." "I'm trying." "You're more than trying. You're amazing." Callum turned and kissed her forehead. "So are you." They stood like that, the 3 of them, in the quiet dark, and Evelyn felt a peace she had never known. By the time Grace was 3 months old, winter had settled over the valley again. But this winter felt different. The house was warm, filled with laughter and life. The ranch was stable, the work manageable. And Evelyn and Callum had fallen into a rhythm that felt effortless. One evening, Evelyn was nursing Grace when Callum came in from the barn, snow dusting his shoulders. "It's coming down hard out there," he said, shaking off his coat. "Think we're snowed in?" "Probably, but we've got plenty of food and firewood. We'll be fine." Evelyn smiled. "We always are." Callum sat down beside her, watching Grace nurse. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" "What do you mean?" "If you hadn't walked into that feed store, if I'd said no, if Fairchild had won." Evelyn looked at him. "I try not to. It scares me too much." "Me too. But then I think about how lucky we are, that we found each other, that we fought for this." Evelyn reached over and took his hand. "It wasn't luck. It was you. You chose to stay. You chose to fight. You chose me. And you chose me. Best decision I ever made. Callum smiled, and Evelyn felt her heart swell. Later that night, after Grace was asleep, Evelyn and Callum sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets, watching the flames dance. I've been thinking, Callum said. About what? About the ranch. About the future. About what we want to build here. Evelyn looked at him. What do you want to build? Something that lasts, something Grace can inherit, something that shows the world what we fought for. Evelyn smiled. I want that too. Then let's do it. Let's make this ranch the best in the valley. Let's prove that a marriage built on survival can become something legendary. Evelyn leaned against him. We already have. Callum kissed the top of her head. Then let's keep going. They sat like that for hours, talking about the future, making plans, dreaming together. And when they finally went to bed, Evelyn lay beside Callum, listening to Grace's soft breathing from the nursery, and felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. This was her life now. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And hers. And she would fight to keep it, every single day for the rest of her life. Spring arrived late that year, but when it came with a fury that made the valley explode with color. Wildflowers covered the hillsides in waves of purple and gold. The creek ran high and fast with snowmelt, and the Mercer Ranch, now officially registered under both Evelyn and Callum's names, looked better than it had in years. Grace was 6 months old, a chubby baby with her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She had started sitting up on her own, reaching for everything within arm's length, and laughing at things only babies found funny. Evelyn loved her with a fierceness that still surprised her. She had not known it was possible to love someone this much. One morning in early May, Evelyn was in the kitchen making breakfast when she heard a knock at the door. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened it to find a woman standing on the porch. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and tired eyes. A small boy clung to her skirt, no older than 4. "Can I help you?" Evelyn asked. The woman hesitated. "Are you Evelyn Hale?" "I am." "My name is Sarah Dennison. I heard about what you did, about the court case, about keeping your land." Evelyn studied her. "Where'd you hear about that?" "All over the territory. People are talking about it. About you." Sarah's voice wavered. "I need help. My husband died last winter, and now the county's saying I can't keep our homestead because I'm unmarried. They're giving me 30 days to find a husband or lose everything." Evelyn's chest tightened. She had known this would happen, known that her fight would not be the last. But standing face to face with another woman in the same desperate situation made it real in a way she had not expected. "Come inside," Evelyn said. Sarah followed her into the kitchen. Callum was feeding Grace in the high chair he had built last month. He looked up when they entered. "This is Sarah Dennison," Evelyn said. "She's got the same problem we had." Callum set the spoon down. "The county's coming after your land?" Sarah nodded. "My husband homesteaded 200 acres near Silver Creek. We built a cabin, planted crops, raised livestock, and now they're saying I can't keep it because I don't have a man's name on the deed." "That's the same law they used on me," Evelyn said quietly. "I know. That's why I came. I thought maybe you could tell me what to do, how to fight it." Evelyn and Callum exchanged a glance. Evelyn sat down at the table and gestured for Sarah to do the same. "Fighting, it's not easy," Evelyn said. "We barely won, and it cost us everything we had. I don't have anything left to lose." "You have your son." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I know, that's why I'm here. I can't let him grow up thinking his mother gave up without a fight." Evelyn looked at the woman across from her and saw herself a year ago, desperate, terrified, alone, and she made a decision. "We'll help you," Evelyn said. Sarah's breath caught. "Really?" "Really. But you need to understand something. This fight's going to get ugly. People are going to say terrible things about you. They're going to question everything you do, and there's no guarantee you'll win." "I understand. Do you have a lawyer?" "No, I can't afford one." Evelyn looked at Callum. He nodded. "We'll take you to Samuel Grant," Evelyn said. "He's the lawyer who represented us. He's good, and he believes in this fight. If anyone can help you, he can." Sarah's face crumpled, and she started crying. Thank you so much." Evelyn reached across the table and took her hand. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn and Callum became deeply involved in Sarah's case. They rode into town with her to meet with Samuel Grant. They helped her organize her documents, gather witnesses, and prepare for the inevitable court hearing. It was exhausting work, and it brought back memories Evelyn would have preferred to forget. But it also felt right, like this was what they were supposed to do. "You think she'll win?" Callum asked one night after Sarah and her son had left. "I don't know," Evelyn said, "but I think she's got a better chance than I did, because now there's a precedent. The judge ruled in our favor. That means something." "It does, but it doesn't mean they'll rule the same way twice." "No, but it means we've opened a door, and once a door's open, it's hard to close." Callum smiled. "You sound like a revolutionary." "Maybe I am." "Good. The world could use more of those." Sarah's hearing was scheduled for late June. By then, 3 more women had come to the ranch asking for help. Evelyn found herself in the strange position of becoming something she had never intended to be, a voice for women who had no voice of their own. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," she told Callum one evening. "You are." "How do you know?" "Because you've lived it. You know what it's like to fight for something everyone else thinks you don't deserve. That makes you exactly the right person." Evelyn looked at him, and her chest tightened. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just didn't notice." She laughed and kissed him, and for a moment the weight of everything lifted. Sarah's hearing went better than anyone expected. Samuel Grant presented a strong case, citing Evelyn's victory as precedent. He argued that the law was antiquated, unjust, and needed to be challenged. The judge ruled in Sarah's favor, and when the verdict was read, Sarah collapsed in her chair, sobbing with relief. Evelyn and Callum were there to witness it. Afterward, Sarah threw her arms around Evelyn and held on tight. "I can't thank you enough," she said through tears. "You don't have to thank me. Just keep fighting." "I will. I promise." Word of Sarah's victory spread quickly. By the end of summer, women from all over the territory were filing claims, challenging the law, and demanding the right to own property without a husband's permission. It was a slow, messy process, and not every case was successful. But the tide was shifting, and Evelyn could feel it. One afternoon in late August, Evelyn was working in the garden when a familiar figure rode up the road. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her stomach drop. It was Thomas Fairchild. She walked toward the house, her heart pounding. Callum was in the barn, and she debated calling for him, but she decided against it. She could handle Fairchild on her own. Fairchild dismounted and tipped his hat. "Mrs. Hale." "What do you want, Fairchild?" "Just to talk. We have nothing to talk about." "I think we do." Evelyn crossed her arms. "You've got 2 minutes." Fairchild sighed. "I came to apologize." Evelyn stared at him. "What?" "I was wrong. About you. About your marriage. About everything. I let my greed cloud my judgment, and I hurt you in the process." "I'm sorry." Evelyn did not know what to say. She had spent a year hating this man, and now he was standing on her porch apologizing. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I've watched what you've done. How you've helped other women fight for their land. How you've changed this valley, and I realized I was on the wrong side of history." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "You nearly destroyed my life." "I know, and I can't undo that. But I want you to know that I'm stepping back. I won't challenge any more cases like yours, and I'll support the women who are fighting for their rights." Evelyn studied him. He looked older, tired, like the fight had taken something out of him too. "I don't forgive you," she said quietly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever, but I appreciate the apology." Fairchild nodded. "That's more than I deserve." He climbed back onto his horse and tipped his hat again. "Good luck, Mrs. Hale. You're doing important work." He rode away, and Evelyn stood on the porch, watching him disappear down the road. She did not know if his apology was genuine, and she did not know if she would ever forgive him. But she knew one thing: she had won. Not just the court case, not just the ranch, but something bigger, something that mattered. That evening, she told Callum about Fairchild's visit. "You think he meant it?" Callum asked. "I don't know. But I think he's tired of fighting a losing battle." "Good. Let him be tired." Evelyn smiled. "You're not very forgiving, are you?" "Not when it comes to people who hurt you." Evelyn leaned against him. I love you. I love you too. They sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley, and Evelyn felt a peace she had not felt in a long time. By autumn, the ranch was thriving. The cattle had multiplied, the crops were abundant, and Evelyn and Callum had saved enough money to hire 2 permanent hands. Grace was walking now, toddling around the house and getting into everything. She was curious, fearless, and reminded Evelyn so much of herself it was almost frightening. One evening in late September, Evelyn was putting Grace to bed when Callum appeared in the doorway. Can I talk to you? He asked. Of course. They walked out to the porch and sat down. The air was cool, the sky full of stars. I've been thinking about something, Callum said. What? About the ranch. About what we're building here. About the legacy we're leaving for Grace. Evelyn looked at him. What about it? I think we should put both our names on the gate. Evelyn frowned. They already are. On the deed. I know, but I mean on the gate, where everyone can see. Mercer and Hale, equal partners. Evelyn's throat tightened. You want to do that? I do, because this ranch isn't mine or yours. It's ours, and I want everyone to know that. Evelyn reached over and took his hand. I'd like that. Callum smiled. Good. I'll start working on it tomorrow. They sat in silence, holding hands, and Evelyn thought about how far they had come. From strangers who married out of desperation to partners who had built a life together. It had not been easy. It had not been smooth. But it had been real. The new gate was finished by mid-October. Callum carved the letters himself, deep and clean, and mounted the sign on 2 sturdy posts at the entrance to the ranch. It read, Mercer and Hale Ranch, established 1885. Evelyn stood beside him, staring at the sign, and felt tears prick her eyes. It's perfect, she said. It is. My father would have liked this. Callum put his arm around her. I think he would have been proud of you. I hope so. They stood there for a long time, looking at the gate, and Evelyn felt like something had come full circle. This land had been her father's dream, then it had been her burden, and now it was her legacy. A legacy she would pass down to Grace, and Grace would pass down to her children, and on and on. A legacy built not just on survival, but on love. Winter came again, as it always did, but this time Evelyn was ready for it. The house was warm, the barn was stocked, and the family was strong. Grace was nearly a year old now, babbling constantly and taking her first shaky steps. She was a fighter, just like her mother, and Evelyn loved watching her discover the world. One snowy evening in December, Evelyn and Callum sat by the fire while Grace played on the floor with wooden blocks. Callum was whittling a small horse for her, and Evelyn was mending a shirt. You ever think about having more kids? Callum asked suddenly. Evelyn looked up. More? Yeah, Grace is great, but I wouldn't mind having a few more running around. Evelyn smiled. You want a house full of kids? I want whatever you want. That's a terrible answer. Callum laughed. Fine. Yes, I want more kids. I want this house full of noise and chaos and life, because I spent so many years alone and now I can't imagine going back to that. Evelyn set the shirt down. I want that too. Yeah? Yeah. Callum leaned over and kissed her, and Grace looked up from her blocks and clapped. See, Callum said. She approves. Evelyn laughed, and the sound filled the room, warm and bright. By the following spring, Evelyn was pregnant again. This time, she was less scared. She knew what to expect, knew her body could handle it, knew Callum would be beside her the entire time. And she was right. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when their son was born in late summer, it felt like a gift. They named him James, after Evelyn's father. He was small and quiet, the opposite of Grace in every way. Where Grace was loud and fearless, James was calm and observant. Evelyn loved them both fiercely, and watching Callum with them made her heart ache in the best way. You're a good father, she told him one night after the kids were asleep. I'm trying. You're more than trying. You're amazing. Callum pulled her close. So are you. They stood in the quiet house, holding each other, and Evelyn thought about how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been alone, desperate, fighting to keep her land. And now she had a husband who loved her, 2 children who needed her, and a ranch that was thriving. It was not the life she had imagined. It was better. The years that followed were not without struggle. There were hard winters, failed crops, and sick cattle. There were arguments between Evelyn and Callum, moments when the weight of everything felt too heavy. But they worked through it, together, because that was what they had promised each other. To carry the weight together, to fight together, to build together. Grace grew into a fierce, independent girl who rode horses like she was born to it. James was quieter, more thoughtful, but just as determined. They both inherited their parents' stubbornness, and Evelyn often joked that she and Callum had cursed themselves. "They're exactly like us," she said one evening, watching Grace and James argue over who got to feed the chickens. "That's what scares me," Callum replied. Evelyn laughed, and Callum wrapped his arm around her. "We did good," he said. "We did. You ever regret it? Any of it?" Evelyn looked at him. "Not for a second." "Good. Because I don't either." They stood on the porch, watching their children, and Evelyn felt a contentment she had never thought possible. By the time Grace was 10 and James was 8, the Mercer and Hale Ranch was one of the most successful in the valley. Other ranchers came to Evelyn and Callum for advice. Women from across the territory wrote letters asking how to fight for their land. And slowly, the laws began to change. It was not a sudden shift, but a gradual one. The result of countless women standing up, refusing to back down, and demanding to be treated as equals. Evelyn never took credit for it. She always said she was just one voice among many. But Callum knew better. He knew that Evelyn's fight had started something bigger than either of them could have imagined. One evening, when Grace was 12, she asked Evelyn about the court case. "Is it true you almost lost the ranch?" Grace asked. Evelyn looked at her daughter. "Yes." "Why?" "Because the law said I couldn't own it without a husband." Grace frowned. "That's stupid." It was. But that's how things were. "And you fought it?" "I did." "And you won?" "I did." Grace thought about that for a moment. Then she said, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You already are." Grace smiled, and Evelyn pulled her into a hug. That night, Evelyn told Callum about the conversation. "She wants to be like you," Callum said. "I know. That's a good thing." "I hope so." Callum took her hand. "It is. Because you're strong, brave, and you never give up. Those are good things to pass down." Evelyn looked at him, and her chest ached with love. "We made a good life, didn't we?" "We did." "It wasn't easy." "No, but it was worth it." Evelyn nodded. "It was." They sat in silence, holding hands, and Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate arrangement to a real partnership, from survival to love, from loss to legacy. The following autumn, Grace turned 13, and Evelyn realized her daughter was no longer a child. She was becoming a young woman, strong and fierce and unafraid, and Evelyn saw in her the future she had fought so hard to secure. One evening, Evelyn and Grace were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley. "Mom," Grace said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever wish things had been different, that you'd married someone else, that you'd had an easier life?" Evelyn looked at her daughter. "No. Never? Never. Because if things had been different, I wouldn't have your father. I wouldn't have you or James. I wouldn't have this ranch, this life. And I wouldn't trade any of it for an easier path." Grace nodded slowly. "I think I understand." "Good. Because the easy path is rarely the right one. Is that why you fought so hard?" "I fought because I had no choice. But I kept fighting because I realized something important." "What?" "That the things worth having are the things worth fighting for. Your land, your family, your freedom, those things don't come easy. But when you earn them, they mean something." Grace looked out at the valley. "I want to earn something too." Evelyn smiled. "You will. I have no doubt." That winter was brutal, the worst in years. Snow fell for weeks, burying the valley under drifts that reached the roofline. Evelyn and Callum worked around the clock to keep the animals alive, the house warm, and the family fed. It was exhausting, relentless, and there were moments when Evelyn wondered if they would make it through. But they did. Because that was what they did. They survived. When spring finally came, the valley was transformed. The snow melted, the creek ran high, and the wildflowers bloomed in waves of color, and the Mercer and Hale Ranch stood strong, a testament to everything they had built. One morning in late April, Evelyn woke to find Callum already up, standing by the window, looking out at the valley. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Callum turned. "Everything. How far we've come, how much we've built, how lucky I am." Evelyn got out of bed and walked over to him. "I'm the lucky one." "No, I am. Because I was drifting before I met you. I had no purpose, no direction. And then you asked me to marry you, and everything changed." Evelyn's eyes burned. "I asked because I was desperate." "I know. But I said yes because I saw something in you, something worth staying for." "What did you see?" "Strength, courage, a refusal to give up, even when everyone else thought you should. And I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be part of you." Evelyn reached up and cupped his face. "You are. You always have been." Callum kissed her, slow and deep, and Evelyn felt like her heart might burst. By the time Grace was 15 and James was 13, the valley had changed. More women owned land, more families thrived, and the laws that had once threatened to take everything away were slowly being dismantled. It was not perfect, it was not complete, but it was progress. And Evelyn knew that progress was never smooth. It was messy, frustrating, and took longer than anyone wanted, but it was real, and it mattered. One evening, Evelyn and Callum were sitting on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. Grace was teaching James how to lasso a fence post, and James was laughing as the rope tangled around his feet. "You think they'll keep this place going?" Callum asked. "I do." "How do you know?" "Because they've seen what it takes. They've seen us fight for it. They've seen us work for it. They know it's not just land, it's legacy." Callum nodded. "Good." They sat in silence, and Evelyn thought about her father, about the dreams he had for this land, about the sacrifices he had made, and she hoped he was proud of what she had built, what she and Callum had built together. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new triumphs. Grace grew into a strong, capable young woman who ran the ranch with the same determination Evelyn had. James was quieter, but no less committed. He loved the land in a way that was deep and unspoken, and Evelyn knew he would protect it fiercely. By the time Evelyn was 40, the ranch had expanded. They had bought the neighboring property when it came up for sale, doubling their acreage. They hired more hands, built new barns, and became one of the most respected ranches in the territory. But more than that, they had become a symbol of what could be built when two people refused to give up, when they chose to fight together, to love together, to build together. One cold October morning, 20 years after their first wedding, Evelyn woke to find Callum already dressed and standing in the bedroom doorway. "Come outside," he said. "Why?" "Just trust me." Evelyn pulled on her robe and followed him out to the porch. The sun was just rising, painting the valley in shades of gold and red. And there, standing in the yard, were Grace and James, both holding a new sign. Evelyn walked down the steps, her heart pounding. The sign read, "Mercer and Hale Ranch, established 1885, now owned by Evelyn Hale, Callum Hale, Grace Hale, and James Hale." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "What is this?" "It's the future," Grace said. "We talked about it, and we want our names on the ranch. Not because we think we've earned it, but because we want to carry it forward, together." Evelyn looked at Callum, and he smiled. "I told you," he said. "Legacy." Evelyn walked over to her children and pulled them both into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." "We learned from the best," James said. Evelyn laughed through her tears. They spent the rest of the morning hanging the new sign, and when it was done, Evelyn stood back and looked at it with a sense of completion she had never felt before. This was not just her ranch anymore. It was theirs, a family legacy built on love, sacrifice, and an unwavering refusal to give up. That evening, Evelyn and Callum sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the valley. Their valley. Their home. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Evelyn asked. "All the time." And I'm grateful every day that they turned out this way." Evelyn leaned against him. "Me too." They sat in silence, and Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought them here, the desperate marriage that had saved her land, the man who had stayed when everyone else would have left, the children who had grown up strong and fierce, and the legacy they had built together. It was not a perfect story. There had been pain, fear, and moments when everything had felt impossible, but that was what made it real. That was what made it matter. Because the truth was, love was not something that happened easily. It was something you fought for, something you built, brick by brick, day by day. It was waking up every morning and choosing each other, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And Evelyn had learned that the desperate decisions we make in moments of survival can become the foundation for something extraordinary. That the people who stay when they have every reason to leave are the ones worth holding on to. And that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never plan for. She had married Callum out of necessity, but she had stayed because of love, and that love had become the bedrock of everything they had built. One night, a few weeks later, Evelyn woke to find Grace standing in the doorway of her bedroom. "Mom?" Grace whispered. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I just wanted to tell you something." Evelyn sat up. "What?" Grace walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. "I met someone." Evelyn's heart skipped. "You did?" "His name is Daniel. He works on the Thornton Ranch. He's kind, hardworking, and he makes me laugh." Evelyn smiled. "That's wonderful. I wanted you to know because—" Grace hesitated. "Because I want to do it right. I don't want to rush into anything. I want to build something real, like you and Dad did." Evelyn's throat tightened. "That's smart. Did you know, when you married Dad, that it would turn into this?" "No, I had no idea." "Then how did you know he was the right person?" Evelyn thought about it. "I didn't, not at first, but I watched him. I saw how he worked, how he treated me, how he never asked for anything in return. And I realized that love isn't something you find. It's something you build. With the right person, every day gets a little easier. The weight gets a little lighter. And before you know it, you've built something that can withstand anything." Grace nodded slowly. "I want that. Then take your time. And choose someone who'll stay when things get hard." "Like Dad?" "Like Dad." Grace hugged her, and Evelyn held her tight, thinking about how fast time had moved, how her little girl had become a woman, how the legacy she had fought so hard to protect was now in capable hands. The following spring, Grace got engaged. Daniel was a good man, quiet and steady, and Evelyn liked him immediately. The wedding was small, held in the front yard of the ranch under the oak tree. Evelyn stood beside Callum, watching their daughter get married, and felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. "She's grown up," Callum said quietly. "She has." "You okay?" "I will be." Callum took her hand. "We did good." "We did." After the ceremony, Evelyn found Grace standing by the barn, looking out at the valley. "You all right?" Evelyn asked. Grace nodded. "Just taking it in. All of this. Everything you and Dad built. Everything I'm inheriting. It's yours now. Yours and James's." "I know, and I promise I'll take care of it." Evelyn smiled. "I know you will." They stood in silence, and Evelyn thought about the cycle of life. How the things we fight for become the things we pass down. How the struggles we endure become the stories we tell. And how the love we build becomes the foundation for future generations. That night, Evelyn and Callum lay in bed, holding each other in the dark. "You tired?" Callum asked. "Exhausted." "Good tired or bad tired?" "Good tired." Callum kissed her forehead. "I love you." "I love you too." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Evelyn dreamed of wildflowers and wide open spaces and a life built on love. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. James eventually married a woman named Clara, and they had 3 children who ran wild on the ranch. Grace and Daniel had 2 daughters who were as fierce and stubborn as their grandmother. And the Mercer and Hale Ranch became a place where multiple generations lived and worked together, carrying on the legacy that Evelyn and Callum had started. By the time Evelyn was 60, her hair was streaked with gray and her hands were worn from decades of hard work. But she was happy, happier than she had ever thought possible. One evening in late autumn, she and Callum were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley. Their valley. The place they had fought for, built together and filled with life. You ever regret it? Evelyn asked, saying yes that day in the feed store. Callum looked at her, his gray eyes steady and warm. Not once. Not even when things got hard. Especially not then, because that's when I knew it was real. Evelyn leaned against him. I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you asked. They sat in silence, and Evelyn thought about the desperate woman she had been all those years ago. The woman who had walked into a feed store and asked a stranger to marry her. The woman who had been terrified of losing everything. And she thought about the woman she had become. Strong, loved, surrounded by family, living a life she had built with her own hands. It had not been easy, but it had been worth it. Because the truth was, survival was only the beginning. What mattered was what you did after you survived. Whether you let fear control you, or whether you chose to build something beautiful out of the wreckage. Evelyn had chosen to build. And in doing so, she had discovered that love was not something that happened to you. It was something you created day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. And the legacy she left behind was not just land or cattle or a name on a gate. It was the knowledge that two people, starting with nothing but desperation and determination, could build something that would last for generations. That was the story she wanted her grandchildren to know. Not that life was easy, but that it was worth fighting for. That love was not a fairy tale, but a choice. And that the best things in life were the ones you earned. One cold October morning, Evelyn woke before dawn. She got up quietly, careful not to wake Callum, and walked out to the porch. The valley was silent, wrapped in mist, and the first light of day was just beginning to touch the mountains. She stood there looking out at everything they had built, and felt a deep sense of peace. This was her life, imperfect, hard-won, real, and she would not trade it for anything. Behind her, she heard the door open. Callum stepped out, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and stood beside her. Beautiful morning, he said. It is. You thinking about something? Evelyn smiled. Just how lucky I am. Callum took her hand. Me too. They stood together, watching the sun rise over the valley, and Evelyn thought about the desperate marriage that had saved her land and the quiet man who had saved her life. And she knew, deep in her bones, that this was exactly where she was meant to be.
Right, meow. And we're gonna lurk, of course, in hijinkses. We gotta do all the lurksies for our friends. For our friendos. Also, let me just double check. All right, who's this? Oh, that's interesting. Wait, are they making a massive mache? That is cool. That's freaking cool. Whoa. Sorry, I just found a new channel to support. It looks pretty neat. Okay. Okay. I'd love to get to 46 roast tonight, but I don't know if that's possible. We are going to try. So I'm hoping I can figure out this gaming PC issue and hopefully be gaming on that computer eventually again. Yeah, honestly, it's probably a Windows update. It's a Windows 10 machine though, so I don't know. Maybe I had a security breach on the computer. Wouldn't be surprised. Would not be surprised.